Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. I am dying in an hour. Before that, I wanted to share my story. I know, everyone has a story, but I'm glad you're listening to mine. It's a strange feeling, knowing the exact time and date you'll meet your end. It doesn't feel real, even now, but the seconds are ticking away and there's nothing I can do about it. It started subtly. People were dropping dead and no one knew why. Doctors called them heart attacks, but there were no warning signs. 1 second, someone was fine. The next, their heart simply stopped, like flipping a switch. Then, some of them started to know it was coming. A few showed up at hospitals in advance, telling doctors, "I'm going to die in exactly 3 hours. I have 2 days left. It's happening tonight." At first, no one believed them. But when those people died at the exact time they predicted, it turned into hysteria. At first, it was a handful of cases. Then it was dozens. Then hundreds. I think I might be one of the last ones left. Alive, I mean. The hospitals were overwhelmed with people begging doctors to stop it, to undo whatever was happening to them. But no one could. The death count exploded. Then the government stepped in. It only took them half a day to figure out the source, how everyone knew their death date, how it was spreading. It was something so simple, something so ordinary, something we're surrounded by all the time. The radio. It was in stores, in cars, in waiting rooms, offices, bedrooms, everywhere. They issued the emergency alert right after that. Emergency alert, do not listen to the radio. But it didn't help. Because if you were going to die, wouldn't you want to know when? Wouldn't you need to? The government figured it out too late. By the time they sent the emergency alert, it had already spread too far. "Do not listen to the radio," flashed across every screen, echoed from every speaker. But warnings don't work on people who are already doomed. The ones who heard their death date didn't try to fight it. Some begged for answers, so others ran to the hospitals hoping for a cure, but most just accepted it. Like their fate was locked in the moment they heard it. And then they died. It didn't matter if you were healthy, young, old, rich, poor. If you heard it, you were marked. Their hearts just stopped. Some people tried to prove it was a hoax, tried to fight it. But the countdown was never wrong. Not once. Even those who mocked it swore up and down they'd prove it wrong, still dropped dead at the exact time they were given. That's when the world panicked. People started breaking into houses, smashing every radio they could find. Governments sent out emergency teams to burn down every radio station, every transmission tower. But it wasn't enough. Curiosity was stronger than fear. People still wanted to know. Because if you were going to die anyway, wouldn't you rather be prepared? I never did. I made my choice early on. I never turned on a radio. Never let the curiosity win. For a while, it seemed like that was the only way to survive. As long as you didn't listen, you were safe. But millions didn't have that self-control. Some people heard their countdown on accident, stepping into a store with a radio playing, walking past a car with its speakers still on. They freeze up, eyes going blank, and you could tell the exact second they heard their death sentence. A month later, half the population was gone. Hospitals shut down, cities emptied, entire countries collapsed. And it didn't stop. Governments declared martial law. No more phones, no more TVs. They went further, started taking away anything that could carry a voice. Then they pulled the final plug. Electricity shut down, no more factories, no more jobs, no more broadcasts. We were back to living in the dark. For those of us still alive, it was like stepping into an ancient world. And for a while, it worked. The radios were gone. The transmissions stopped. For 2 years, things were quiet. I never thought the world would end like this. Not with fire, not with war, not even with some plague eating us from the inside out. Just silence. I've lived in the ruins for 2 years now. Not much of a life, but it's something. The world didn't completely fall apart, but it's empty in a way that feels worse than an apocalypse should. The streets are still here. Buildings still stand. There's no smoke rising from the horizon, no wreckage littering the roads. But everything is abandoned. No stores, no people, no cars. Just a dead world that used to be full. There's plenty of supplies, more than I could ever need. I don't have to fight anyone for food, don't have to scavenge in desperation. There's no shortage of anything because most of the people who used to need it are gone. I never wanted to live like a vulture, picking through a dead world, so I take only what I need. If I find money, I leave it at the register. A habit, I guess. Helps me feel human. I don't take more than I can carry. I don't move into some rich guy's mansion just because I can. I keep my little apartment and pretend it's normal. Pretend the world isn't rotting away outside. The only real company I have is Toby. I found him a year ago, sniffing through an alleyway. He was thin back then, all ribs and matted fur, but he's healthy now. A big, dumb, loyal mutt who keeps me from going insane. And I need that. Because I don't trust the people still out here. There are groups, patrols, driving through the city in rigged-up cars, searching. I don't know what they want, and I don't care. They look for people, and when they find them, those people never come back. Every now and then I hear screaming in the distance, and every time I grip Toby's collar, whispering for him to stay quiet. He listens, never reacts, never makes a sound. That's the only reason I'm still here. Until the night he did react. Not to someone else's screams, to mine. I was trying to break into a pet store for food when it happened. The door was jammed and I got frustrated, smashing at it harder than I should have. When the glass finally gave in, I wasn't expecting it, and I slipped, straight into a jagged shard. The pain hit all at once, like fire ripping through my arm. I looked down and saw red. Not a trickle, not a cut, a full spray. Blood pulsing from the gash, like something inside me had burst. I screamed, Toby barked, and just like that, I was dead. Because they heard me. Within minutes, the rigged-up cars came. Bright headlights swung around the street, tearing through the dark. My breath hitched as I tried to run, but my vision blurred from the blood loss. Heavy boots slammed against pavement. Then, black. Something tied around my eyes, hands grabbing me, dragging me. I was thrown into the back of a van, and they took Toby too. I don't know if that was supposed to be a mercy. Maybe they just didn't want him making noise. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't getting out of this alive. The ride was long. I don't know how long exactly, but it felt like I drifted in and out of consciousness. Maybe it was the blood loss, maybe it was the fear. Either way, by the time they pulled me out of the van, my arm was throbbing, my head was swimming, and I still couldn't see a damn thing. The blindfold stayed on. They dragged me forward, their hands rough against my arms. I didn't fight. There was no point. My legs barely worked, my body swayed with every step. Then, sterile air. That's the first thing I noticed, the scent of clean floors, disinfectant, metal. Not the mildew and rot of the outside world. A hospital. They set me down on something, felt like a bed. I flinched when scissors snipped through my sleeve, cutting away the bloody fabric. Someone was already tending to my wound. Their hands were gentle, but I didn't trust it. My gut twisted with unease. This place was wrong. Too clean, too controlled, too alive. Then another person walked in. I knew it was a man before he even spoke. I could feel his presence, calm, careful steps as he approached. Something thumped onto the mattress beside me. A hand brushed against me. I flinched away, trying to scoot back, but I had nowhere to go. Then I heard panting. Not mine. Toby's. The man was petting him. I clenched my fists. I know you're scared, he said, voice calm. Too calm. Please don't be, we're trying to help you. I barked out a dry laugh, shaking my head. Yeah? Is that why you blindfolded me and threw me in a van? Real welcoming. He sighed like he'd had this conversation 100 times before. Maybe he had. I try to make this easy for people, he murmured, but I can play your game. He stood up, walked away, and then, darkness. Someone pulled the blindfold tighter. I struggled, but my arms were already being tied down. Rope burned against my skin as I fought against it. Too late, footsteps retreated. A click. The door shut. I screamed, yanking against the restraints, but they didn't budge. And then I heard it. Another click. Something was placed on the bedside table, and then... static. I froze. My breath hitched. I knew that sound. I knew what was coming. The static fluctuated, shifting through stations, searching. My body locked up. I clenched my jaw so tight it ached, trying to drown it out, trying to scream over it. But then, the sound wasn't just coming from the radio. It was inside my head, and then a voice, soft, whispering, laughing, and then finally it spoke. Not just any voice, my voice. Katie, it purred, you have 2 days, 6 hours, 54 minutes, and 13 seconds. I sobbed because I had heard it, and now I knew. The radio shut off. Silence settled in the room, but it didn't feel empty. It felt tainted, like something had been left behind in my head. I could still hear it. That whisper, my whisper. 2 days, 6 hours, 54 minutes, 13 seconds. My own voice had sentenced me. I gasped for air, my chest tightening as the weight of it all crushed down on me. I had lasted 2 years, 2 years of surviving, avoiding, resisting. And now it didn't matter. I had heard it. It was over. The ropes dug into my wrists as I pulled, yanked, fought against them with everything I had left. The burns didn't matter. The pain didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. I screamed, raw and desperate, as if I could drown out what had already been said. A click. The door opened. Footsteps. Someone was inside with me. I couldn't see them. My eyes were still covered. The bed shifted slightly as they placed something beside me. Another click. Then the footsteps retreated. The door shut again. Silence. I sucked in a breath, my body still trembling. And then, suddenly, hands on me. I tensed, every muscle in my body locking up as someone yanked the ropes loose. For a moment I couldn't move. My arms were free, but they felt weightless. Then, before I could react, hands gripped my shoulders, dragging me off the bed. I struggled, kicked, thrashed, but they were stronger. My feet barely touched the ground as they hauled me forward. Through a doorway. Down a hall. The sound of heavy doors creaking open. Then cold air, outside. The ground was rough under my knees as they threw me down. The van, I knew that smell, that stale air. I barely had time to brace before they shoved me inside. Another slam. Doors locked. Engine rumbled to life. I clawed at my face, tearing off the blindfold. Darkness outside. Faint city lights in the distance. I barely had time to process it before the van lurched forward. They were taking me back. Wherever they had picked me up, that's where they were leaving me. Because to them, I was already dead. I sat in the dark, blindfolded, wrists burning against the ropes that held me down. My breath came in short, uneven gasps, chest rising and falling too fast. My mind kept looping the same 6 numbers over and over again. 2 days, 6 hours, 54 minutes, 13 seconds. I had heard it. And now, no matter what I did, my heart would stop at exactly that time. But why? Why would they do this to me? The people who took me, the ones in the clean hospital, they weren't scavengers. They weren't desperate survivors looking for food or weapons. They had supplies, order, structure. They had a plan. So why? I swallowed hard, trying to push past the panic clawing at my throat. They didn't ask me for anything, didn't interrogate me, didn't try to recruit me or bring me into whatever they were doing. They just made me listen, forced me to hear my own voice sentence me to death. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't some test. This wasn't about controlling the survivors or keeping people in line. They were eliminating us, one by one. Not because we were dangerous, not because they needed our resources, but because we were a threat in a different way. Because as long as some of us were still alive, so were they. I exhaled sharply, the realization hitting me all at once. They were taking us out before we could take them out, before we could get desperate enough to fight back. They had spent years watching people die. Years knowing that eventually, the ones who remained, the ones like me, would figure out that the only way to survive was to make sure they didn't. They weren't trying to save anyone. They were just making sure we didn't get the chance to end them first. The van screeched to a stop. Before I could react, the doors swung open and rough hands grabbed me again. No words, no explanation. They just hauled me out and threw me onto the cold pavement like I was garbage. I hit the ground hard, the impact jarring my already battered body. My palms scraped against rough asphalt as I caught myself. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. The moment I turned around, they were already gone. The van doors slammed shut. The tires screeched against the road. Then, silence. I sat there for a long time, stunned, and when I finally looked around, I knew exactly where I was. Right back at the place they had taken me from. The pet store. The shattered glass. The bloodstains still dark on the pavement where I had collapsed. They had dumped me back like nothing ever happened. But something had happened, I had heard it, and now I knew. 2 days, 6 hours, 54 minutes, 13 seconds. I choked on a sob, shoving myself up to my feet. My legs barely held me, wobbling beneath me as I stumbled forward. I ran ran through the streets past empty cars, abandoned shops, and dark windows that reflected nothing but my own twisted expression. The moment I reached my apartment, I slammed the door shut, locked it, pressed my forehead against the wood, squeezing my eyes shut. I waited for something to change, for the air to shift, for some final sign that my time was running out, but nothing came, just silence, just the countdown in my head. I collapsed onto the floor, my whole body shaking. I had 2 days left, 2 days, and I was alone. They didn't give Toby back. They didn't even say why. Maybe they just didn't see the point. Maybe I was already gone in their eyes. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat there, waiting, thinking, crying. For the first time in 2 years, I felt completely, utterly alone. Or was I? I swallowed hard, gripping my arms as I stared at the empty apartment. The air felt thick, like something unseen was sitting in the room with me, like someone was listening. I let out a shaky breath, closing my eyes. You've been listening to me, haven't you? You now know my story. I really don't want to do this, but I have to. One day you are going to hear it anyway. Please forgive me. You have 5 days, 1 hour, 10 minutes, 5 seconds.